A recent headline from The Atlantic declares America is acting like a failed state. A failed state, saying that businesses and local governments and individuals are doing what is necessary to fight back against the coronavirus with little help from the federal government. Joining us now, David Brooks. He's a New York Times columnist, and Eddie Glaude, Princeton University professor and chairman of the Center for African American Studies. David, you are someone I think of who loves to think and talk and write about America and who we are. Would you describe us as a failed state right now?
I actually wouldn't. I've covered failed states, Russia, around the world. And if we were a failed state, there'd be massive looting right now. There'd be rioting. There'd be massive bribery. I think we have a couple problems. The first is we have a terrible president who will great people up and down the line. The second is that we were too stupid to learn from the mistakes of others. The Asians are handling this reasonably well because they went through it and they botched it, frankly, twice with H1N1 and with SARS. And they figured out how to do it. And we somehow figured we're special. It won't affect us. So we didn't learn from their mistakes. The thing I do worry about is that we're a failed society. This thing hits us when we have low levels of social trust, when suicide was spiking, when depression rates were already rising 3 times over a generation. And so the basic fragments of society are sort of in dissolution, and now they get whacked by a thing that makes everything that people are suffering from just far worse.
But is that because we are socioeconomically so disconnected? Think about all that's happening right now. Think about people who are dying and dying alone. Think about who's working in grocery stores, Eddie Glaude. Yesterday, Lloyd Blankfein, the former CEO and chairman of Goldman Sachs, wrote, "Been quarantined with my life for 4 weeks now. At this point, I have more risk of getting killed by her than by a crummy virus." So in terms of this disconnect, isn't it deeply set in who we are socioeconomically?
I think so. We have historic levels of inequality, wealth inequality. Our lives are siloed. We're segregated. You have hyper concentrations of poverty. You have gated communities. You have the 1% and the top 0.1% living in a world that is completely foreign to the majority of Americans. You have people keeping track of what's going on in Wall Street and their 401ks when a large number of Americans have no idea what Wall Street means for their everyday lives. In some ways, Stephanie, we've experienced what Paul Krugman said calls a kind of learned helplessness when it comes to using government for the good. We have to understand that government can provide the background conditions for a genuinely shared form of life. But when we have conditions where people are struggling to put food on the table, struggling to keep a roof over their heads, in some ways living in a society that's driven by self-interest and greed, it becomes very difficult to begin to think about genuine mutuality, to begin to think about community. So we're all in it for ourselves, and those who lose, they lose because they simply don't, as according to the story, they just simply don't have the stuff to win.
David, how concerned are you that Corona is taking away that community? Over the last few years, you've talked so much and written so much about the power of community. Weavers, these people in society who are bringing people together, who are helping them in times of distress. And in order to truly address coronavirus, we're now separated.
Right, but we're experiencing something together. So that's one thing. We now have a common experience. And maybe we had to be separated to realize how much we're together. And what I see with the Weavers are community builders. They're sort of like when society is broken and fragmented and unequal, they're sort of like the Cajun Navy. They come in, just regular people like those guys with the boats did in Katrina and Harvey, and they do stuff. And there's stuff being done through the Weaver networks all around the country right now. In Nashville, there's a church that's helping out-of-work bartenders. In New York, there's something called Invisible Hands, which brings food to elderly people. Mm-hmm. Elsewhere, there are people linking the young people to senior citizens so they can sort of take care of each other. Even with the restrictions, I've just seen an upsurge in civic activity to help each other out. And I polled my New York Times readers, how you doing? Like, what's your mental health like? And they wrote me the most horrific letters of real depression, just paralyzed with fear. And so we've got a psychological crisis as well. And the Weavers are just trying to hang in there for each other, and hopefully we'll come out the other side.
Eddie, tell me what this is doing to the African-American community, small business owners, from a health perspective, people who don't have the liberty to socially distance.
Well, the first thing that we need to recognize is that we're dying. We're dying at alarming rates. We're looking at the data as it's coming in because we had to cry for it. We're seeing 70% of the deaths in Milwaukee, African-American, 70% of the deaths in Chicago, African-American. 70% of the deaths in New Orleans, African-American. When we look in my own home state, 72% of the death, African-American. In Jackson County, my own hometown, 6 people have died. 5 of those 6 people have been from my town, Moss Point, Mississippi. So we're dying. And we're seeing the disproportionate impact of the burden of this pandemic precisely because of the inequality and the deep structural racism that has defined American society for generations. And you know, Stephanie, we have to put this into context. I've said this earlier, and I close my eyes because I'm trying to think of the devastation. We barely survived the Great Recession of 2008. We lost our homes, we lost our jobs, we re-entered the labor market through the gig economy and at the bottom rung. We've barely gotten back on our feet. And now here comes this pandemic. And so we lost a decade, the decade of the 90s, because of the Great Recession of 2008. I'm talking about Black America. And I think the effects of this pandemic will throw us back into the 60s and the 50s in terms of our economic standing. But I'm worried about our psychic and existential state. Yeah, our psychic and existential state. I am. It is, well, we'll see what happens.
David, last point to you. There are Weavers, there are business leaders around this country, from the top to the bottom, pulling together and doing great things. How do we magnify that? How do we get to the other side of this together in a more valiant way?
Yeah, I would just say, think of what made you who you are. It wasn't because you took some fabulous vacation in Hawaii. The thing that made you who you are most likely was you went through a valley, you went through some hard time. And people in the valley are either broken or they're broken open. And some people shrivel up and they get more selfish. But a lot of people get broken open, they get more vulnerable. They see deeper into themselves. They're more humble. They're more connected to one another. And I'm hopeful that when this is over, we're going to say we're not going to go back to the way it was. There's going to be a shift in culture, a shift in politics. And it may look like nothing we can predict right now. But this thing has been like an X-ray on our society, exposing racial injustices, exposing economic inequality. We know ourselves better when you're in a valley. So I'm hopeful that we're going to have a great reset. And we're going to come together, and we can finally come together. I think we're going to want to have a lot of music festivals because we just want to be together. But out of that, we can come with some unifying ideas, whether it's national service, whether it's racial justice, whether it's focusing on the early parts of a child's life. These are things we can more or less hopefully all agree on and then build an agenda around it.
Amen.
Well, it's up to us, gentlemen. Tom Bossler said it a few weeks ago. In this very dark moment, if we work together, it can be our finest hour. And I hope it will be. Thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate it.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.